Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from YellowCat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. What's the worst thing you have ever done to an annoying neighbor? I had a terrible work schedule and had to wake up at 2:30 a.m. to be at work by 4 a.m. My downstairs neighbor would blare loud music at all hours of the night and I could feel the bass through my mattress. I went downstairs and politely asked them to turn down the music and they seemed to kindly agree. As soon as I got back in bed, they turned it up even louder and kept it going until about 1:30 a.m. Before I left for work at 3:30, I turned over my amplifier so the speaker was facing the floor, turned the volume up, and set my guitar on top of it. I left for my 12-hour shift and the feedback was still screaming when I came home. Neighbors never blared their music again. They assaulted my dad because he told them to stop yelling at a woman parked in the road, so I bided my time for a few weeks, then filled all the locks on their work van with super glue. My mom's neighbor called the city to demand they make my mom repair her fence that divided their yards. This lady has always been a crabapple for 10 plus years, but this move peed my mom off. The fence did need a few mild repairs, which my mom would have done if the neighbor had just come talk to her. She was already in the process of getting quotes. The city contacts my mom and says you have to maintain your fence. My mom asks if she legally has to have a fence and the person she talked to could sense where this was going. Turns out there are rules about maintaining a fence but not requiring you have one, so my mom pays a contractor to tear it down entirely. The neighbor does come talk to my mom and asks when the new fence will be built. My mom says, "You want a fence? Build it yourself." Couple weeks later, my mom has a nice new fence courtesy of one annoying neighbor. A little petty perhaps, but hilarious nonetheless. Did you know that you can sign up for the Jehovah's Witnesses to come to any address to teach you about their religion? You're welcome. My dad was talking to our neighbor about what color he should paint the house and said, as a joke, "Well, I might as well paint the old one, house blue." The neighbor became almost angry and said stuff like, "You cannot do that! A blue house? How stupid and annoying! How dumb!" etc. And that's how I grew up in a blue house. When I was really young, our neighbor, Druggy, demanded we move our septic tank because he claimed it was partially on his property. He was a complete jerk about it and kept at it. My dad is a really laid-back person. Eventually, even he got mad and had the property line surveyed. Turns out, not only was the septic tank on our property, not his, but the corner of his house and part of his driveway was actually on our land. Dad spent the next few months asking him when he was going to move his house off our land. When I was 10 or so, an old lady yelled at my brother and I for sitting on her curb, and not just yelled, she really beat us out. So we had the bright idea to have an estate sale for her. We got up at like 4 a.m. on Saturday morning and put up homemade cardboard garage sale signs we made with her address on them and "Early Birds Welcome" in bold letters. We then sat on the curb a little down the street across from her house and watched people bang on the door for an hour or so. The best part is we didn't put a date on the sign, so if she didn't find all the signs, presumably people would keep showing up every Saturday. Estate/garage sailing here is an aggressive sport. After all of us kids moved out for college, my parents changed the basement to become a livable unit and started renting it. First two tenants, about 5 years, were great. Never had an issue with them. Third group of tenants stopped paying rent after 3 months. Since it was winter, we couldn't evict them, and my parents had to suffer through their parties and cigarette smell while not receiving rent that was used to pay 70% of the mortgage. My parents being retired, they needed the rent money. Almost lost their house because of these a-holes. Well, my brother and I were home for Christmas that year, and after hearing about the issues, we decided to take care of it. Since it's my parents' house and the people stopped paying rent, we decided to move in with them. We had the keys and would come in and out of the apartment as we wanted. A friend needs a place to sleep? No worries, we have a unit downstairs with 2 beds and 2 couches. Feel free to stay as long as you want. Bars are closing and we want to keep partying? No problem!
We have a furnished apartment and we won't be bothering my parents. I would go there to shower at 2 or 3 in the morning so I don't wake my parents up. My brother slept in one of the beds for 5 days. I invited 20 people once and we were all drinking until 5 a.m. when one of the guys had to go to work in the morning. They did complain about privacy. We told them that according to the law, we were not allowed to throw them out at the moment, but since they stopped paying rent, they lost all privilege over the house. They called the cops the first night they found my brother sleeping there. We explained the situation to the police, and they said that they'd have to take us to court if they wanted us to stop using our apartment. Things we've done: slept in their beds, threw parties in their houses, hosted friends for days, ate their food, drank their alcohol, shower at any time of the day or night, pet sitting, the tenants were allergic so I borrowed my friend's cat, used one of the bedrooms as storage for crap we were supposed to get rid of, opening all the windows in the middle of winter, disconnecting the water heater and told them to take care of it themselves since they weren't tenants but squatters. We sued them and got the money back a couple years later. They left on their own as soon as they knew we could legally evict them. So I think whether we did it or not, the result would have been the same. But it was petty and satisfying. We had neighbors, one girl above us, one girl below us, that were good friends with each other. The one above had 2 small dogs, we were only allowed 1 per apartment, and below had a bigger dog. We all got along fine. The girl above was a bit of an a-hole that would leave her dogs alone for far too long and be very invasive of our lives, begging to use our internet, constantly dropping by and making herself at home. I'm sitting in the living room one day and hear dragging in the hallway. I go check it out and see both of the girls moving a mattress upstairs. They tell me that below is going to move in with the girl above us, making the living room her bedroom and sublet her apartment below us to save some money. This was an old building. Not much in the way of soundproofing. That meant that we would have girl number 1 still living there, who was loud enough as it is, as well as girl number 2, and now 3 dogs above us. We decided to keep the peace and not say anything, until the first night. They decided to have their own dance party at 3 a.m. in heels and screaming wildly, etc. We decided, F it, call the landlord in the morning. The next morning, there's pounding on my door. I go and see it's above girl and she's flipping the F out. We are ruining their lives. Below girl already sublet her apartment. We had no right to tell the landlord. It went on and on. That's when war began. It turns out she had been behind in rent, so the landlord was sick of her and gave both eviction notices. That led to above going absolutely nuts, constantly stomping on her floor, running the hot water in the building for hours so it would run out on everyone else, encouraging her dogs to bark, etc. We changed our Wi-Fi password, enraging her more. She designed ceramic tiles. She started throwing them out of her bedroom window to the ground to make noise. It was just nuts. We wanted to be the bigger people about it all, but soon enough, we needed to take action. We were going away for a couple of days. We knew our next-door neighbors quite well, and they happened to be going away for about a week. We mentioned our plan. They thought it was hilarious, and seeing as they were leaving after us, told us they could deal with it for a few hours. So, right before we left, we turned on that annoying French nun song, Dominique. The upstairs girl may or may not have been named Monique. We hit the replay button, cranked it, and left for 2 days. The landlord called us after about 24 hours. We feigned innocence and that it was a simple oversight on our end. He knew what was up, and we gave him permission to go into our place and turn off the music. Both ended up leaving by the end of the month. Did not stop either from being a-holes, but it was satisfying to know how much both suffered for at least 24 hours. Years ago, when you could advertise house sales in the paper without too many pictures, my brother put in an ad for his obnoxious neighbor's house with an exterior picture and priced it about $75,000 under market as a private sale with the neighbor's phone number. He found out the guy was inundated with calls for weeks, but never found out who had listed it. We did this at our last rental house. The neighbors' semi-detached house were constantly fighting, and they would get drunk every Friday and Saturday, and most Sundays, and blast loud music till 4 a.m. Well, The girlfriend goes out of town for a week for a work training thing, and while she's gone, we see another girl park outside the house, and we also hear the boyfriend and the new girl going at it very loudly. So, at the next party, when they are being super loud at 2 a.m., we both go over and ask them to turn down the music. The boyfriend opens the door and starts shouting that we should mind our own business. The girlfriend appears behind him and says the same. My wife just casually asks, "Oh, did you get back together? What about that nice blonde girl who was over all last week? Is this a throuple situation now?" Then we just went home and enjoyed listening to them throwing everyone out and having their last fight. My grandmother had a neighbor over her back fence who refused to help her repair the fence between their properties. It was still functional as a boundary line, but it was falling apart. Any conversation about fixing the fence ended with him saying that it was on her property, so it was her fence and therefore she was fully responsible, which was fair. She took a fall and was hospitalized for a few weeks. Upon her return, she found a new fence built an extra 5 feet into her property and a bill in the mail from the neighbor. He argued with her for months that she owed him, that the original fence was on his property, and that where it was now was on the boundary line. My grandmother got a surveyor, and surprise, the original fence was correct and the neighbor had taken 5 feet of her yard. At this point, she was very old, frail, and tired of fighting her a-hole neighbor. Instead, she let nature take over. She planted blackberries along the back fence, and within 2 years, it was covered. Every year, she'd walk the fence and throw seeds over because, of course, it was still her yard. After 5 years of fighting, the blackberries had reclaimed her property. She's been gone for a few years now, but the blackberries remain, her way of haunting her neighbor. He's tried ripping up the ones on his side of the fence on numerous occasions, but the plants reseed themselves and grow back every year from her side. Thank you for watching.
Guys, thank you for all of the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.